OXENFREE 2, Lost Signals, Diablo 4, and Colin from Accounts. This is Staying In.
I know he's not here today, but I feel like I want to talk about something that Sam said a little while ago, and I can't remember if this was on the podcast. I don't think it was. The thing, like, real life and the podcast blur into one these days. But Sam said some wisdom to me the other day, and I cannot get it out of my mind, and it has transformed my life over the last, I would say, couple of weeks. And that is, when you're leaving a room, take something with you.
Yep.
Right?
I must admit that did also resonate with me somewhat.
Now, I love this advice. So, just to break it down, much like Ron Seal, it's very much what it says on the tin.
So you're interpreting this literally, not as a metaphor. The room could mean something else.
No, I'm interpreting this literally. I have gotten into the pattern of when I think to myself, oh, I'm just going to go and do something else in some other room. My first thought is, can I take something from this room with me that would help me out in the future, right? And it has stopped me faffing around to no end. So, for example, and this is a kind of magic, where I'll be in the bedroom and I'll be getting ready for the day. And I think, right, okay, I'm going to go downstairs and I'm going to go and grab myself some breakfast. But instead of just going downstairs and grabbing myself some breakfast, just before I leave the bedroom, I think to myself, I'll take some laundry with me. I'll take some dirty laundry with me, and I'll load the I'll load the washing machine while I'm there. And so I'll bundle up a load of stuff, take that downstairs with me, and chuck it in the laundry. And then I think, oh, okay, well, I'm down here. I've got to wait for the toast to pop. I've got to wait for the coffee to, I was going to say brew. I don't drink that fancy coffee. But for the instant coffee, I've got for the kettle to boil.
To dissolve.
And for the instant, yeah, exactly, yeah. And so I think to myself, oh, well, I've brought the laundry down. It's already in the washing machine. I'll just put some tablets in and some conditioner and set it going, and then I'm done. And just that little bit of preparedness, just that little bit of thinking before I leave the room, always take something with you, has meant that laundry has become even easier. It's fantastic. What wisdom, our friend there.
I mean, what scares me, Pete, was if you had heard this, this expression, this phrase, this philosophical kind of statement during lockdown, what would have happened would be you have just swapped everything over in all the rooms in your house.
Yeah.
Pete, we're out of toilet roll again. Where is it? It's in the shed. It's in the shed, because I can't obviously leave the bathroom without taking anything with me, because actually I've just left loads of stuff there. I
was going to say, do you get to the point where it becomes a problem where you can't leave a room because you can't think of something to take with you?
That's the beauty of it, Dan. I haven't reached that situation yet. And that shows you the amount of faff that we do in our lives all of the time of, I do need to go and get that sorted. Oh, I need to go and do the laundry now. And I go, I've got to traipse back upstairs and do all this stuff. No, I've already done it. Right? Like it's, you know that, what's that book called? The Magical Art of Tidying Up, whatever it's called.
You're looking about Marie Kondo? Are you talking about Marie Kondo?
Yeah. This has changed my life. Sam's advice has changed my life in the way that Marie Kondo has changed my life.
His Sam Turner phrase, is it?
Ooh. Oh, nice. They do sit. I have heard people refer to Sam as the Western Marie Kondo.
Yeah.
Is it Sam who's referred to? Who you've heard that from? So does it extend beyond kind of household chores? Can you does it become anything that's other than just practical? Do you live by the crowded house version of always taking the weather with you? How far does this go?
I think, it means that the places are just generally more tidy. And I do sometimes think to myself, if I'm going to go to another room, do I want to do something else there? It makes me consider what it is that I'm going to do there. So, for example, the other day, and this shows you a terrible glimpse into my life, but like on the weekends, I'm exhausted usually. And I think to myself, I know, I'll go upstairs, have a lie down on the bed and just chill out.
In a starfish sort of shape, face down.
Generally, yeah. What I'll actually do is I'll faff around on my phone, right? And there's some great games, I love playing games on my phone and stuff like that, but sometimes it can feel a little bit like a waste. And I was going to do that again the other weekend. And what happened is, instead, I thought to myself, because my brain went, remember, you're leaving the room, take something with you. And I took my comic book reader with me. And I took the comics up to the bedroom. And that was great, because I was like, oh yeah. And I did something meaningful and forward-moving in terms of things that I love, rather than just dossing around on my telephone. So it has had a somewhat... most of the effects, Dan, I will admit, are practical, but it has had some degree of influence and sway in terms of the things that I do for fun.
I was going to say, Kris, what do you think Pete is more... Which extreme is Pete more likely to reach first? Is he going to meet the extreme of he can't leave the room because he can't think of something to take with him? Or he refuses to leave the room because he's too lazy to take something with him?
Well, I'm going to witness this firsthand soon, because Pete and I and Sam are going to be sharing a hotel room together.
Oh, my word. So the two of them just constantly moving things around you like a conveyor belt as they go to the toilet and then they come back again.
I mean, it's going to... I would just want to see a time lapse of the room. Just everything just slowly moving around. Almost like, like sand on a dune, just with the wind, just everything moving around, getting buried.
Oh, gosh. I will say this. There are some rooms that it's more difficult than others. So, for example, it's very difficult to move stuff from the bathroom into other rooms. Equally, the other way around is often not advised.
What do you do in those situations, Pete? What when you look, what's the item that you think, this has use elsewhere in the bathroom?
Well, actually, the time that it does happen is I will take empty loo rolls.
Do you if there's more than one, do you just take one because you think, I'll save that one for later?
Yeah, I think to myself,
I'll need something for my number 2 later on.
Pace yourself.
Episode 40. Think back. We're on episode 181 now.
Episode 40, Staying In podcast. Hold on.
We were all younger men.
Hold on. Let's just look at what was happening around that period of time. It was, old logo.
Was I even a parent at that
point?
Old
logo. Yeah, so Monday, October the 2nd, 2017.
I'd been a parent for about just under a month.
Incredible.
So yeah, I hadn't slept in weeks at this point.
This is pre-demic.
Those simpler times.
This is pre-Cosy Lives.
This feels like a Simpsons episode, when they used to do those episodes where Marge and Homer would tell a story from their past and they would set the scene. It was the year in which this had happened. Such and such was in the charts. It just reminds me a little bit of that. Pre-Cosy Lives.
Yeah.
Pre-pandemic. Dan had just been a parent for a month. It's like, oh yeah, I know where we are.
And the Staying In crew was talking about Jamaica, cheap golf, and for some reason, Little Mix. So
that was when we had Lisa on the episode, Sam's wife.
Yes.
And we were just all marveling at your knowledge of Little Mix.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think it's fair to say, out of all of us, I mean, you'll be the last person we'd think of as being the person who is just like mastermind level knowledge of Little Mix.
Well, let's all, I think I'm a constant surprise. So we were talking about so you're saying we were talking about the original Oxenfree then?
We were talking about Oxenfree, and I really love this game. It is generally one of my top 10 games of all time. It's a game that I revisit every 2 years. There are certain particularly story-driven games where if you play it every year, I think personally the the enjoyment of it wears off a little bit. It wears a little bit thin. Like the Uncharted games, I play those every 2 or 3 years or so, one go. And Oxenfree for me, which is set in the Northwest Pacific kind of coast and fictional town, where a group of teenagers are all about to go off to college. They meet on this island off there, and it's not an abandoned island or anything really. It's got some ruins on it. It has a history, but there are people who live on the island, and the game takes place over one night, as they start around a campfire, and then they go into a cave, and then using these little old school radios, they open a doorway into a parallel kind of void, really.
Mm-hmm.
And they spend the evening trying to heal that rupture, really.
So I've actually, I didn't play Oxenfree, way back when it came out. And I actually tried playing it very recently because it got released onto the Netflix game platform.
Oh,
yes.
So I've got an iPad and I was able to try and start that. And I didn't get very far. Pretty much I got as far as you've said there. I got to the point where they entered the cave and there was kind of with the radios, and there was something about this kind of this kind of portal that was opening. And that was kind of as far as I got. And I was struggling to kind of really click with me. And I fear that just beyond the point of which I have not necessarily stopped, but I've not really carried on at the moment. I think just beyond that point is when it really kicks into gear. So would you say is that kind of where the game finds its way forward?
Yeah, kicks into gear is an interesting expression, really, because one of the reasons why I love the game and one of the reasons why I actually chose to buy this on the Switch is because it has quite a relaxed, measured pace. There are many reasons why people are drawn to Oxenfree. For a lot of people, it's the way it handles dialogue, and it is kind of organic and kind of effortless. So people will be talking, and somebody will ask you a question, and you have 3 options, and you just quickly choose it on one of the buttons, and it does affect what people think of you, but not in a telltale sense where it's like, oh, so and so will remember that. What will happen is a little speech bubble pop above their head with just your picture in it, and it doesn't tell you what they think of you. It just means that you've made an impression on them in some way, shape, or form, and that can affect the endings in some respects, but it's not something that is wedded to that, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
The art style is beautiful in the Oxenfree games. It's this watercolory, imagine a kind of like a comic book kind of line drawing where it's been covered in watercolor painting, but they haven't waited for it to dry. It's just kind of slightly smeary a little bit, and it adds this wonderful kind of dreamlike haze to it. Because I'm burying the lead here, because this is also a horror game.
Okay.
And because you see some quite unsettling things throughout it.
Well, we talked about Oxenfree back in episode 40, and I don't think we've reached the point of this podcast where we're just thinking that let's just cycle back through kind of old episodes and redo them again. So obviously you're playing the sequel here, aren't you?
Yeah.
So without obviously spoilers and giving anything away, when you finished the first game, were you itching for more, or were you thinking, okay, this needs more story to carry on, or did it feel complete? Kind of, where were you when you found out that there was going to be a sequel to this game that you obviously loved?
Well, I was desperate to play this game, desperate for a sequel, not because I necessarily wanted the characters to continue on with these characters. I thought the characters were really lovely. I just loved the world, and I really, really loved the music and design of this. It's one of my favourite albums. It's one of my favourite kind of albums of game music. Very experimental artist, very synthy. This is a slight spoiler, but the game engages with lots of time dilation, and the musician, the composer, inflects that upon the textures and the structure of the music itself. But it's really quite cool, that kind of background. And I was reading an interview with them the other day when they were talking about the sequel and how they've become even more experimental with this, really. Because they've actually had a part of the sound design in the game as well, rather than having a separate role. So yes, I was desperate for a sequel in this regard, really. And I must admit, I've not completed the game yet. I've sunk a few hours into it. I was away last week, so I've been playing it there, really. But you mentioned beforehand that Netflix, you saw this on Netflix, because Netflix, this is the first games company that Netflix bought, took ownership of. This is Night School Studio that did Oxenfree. They also did a game called After Party, which I must confess I really didn't like. I really wanted to like it because it sounds really cool, but it was really glitchy, and it really got in the way of the story. I've not really encountered many glitches so far in the Switch port, but the game itself, you could feasibly so far play this game without having played the original, because it's set on a different island that is near the one from the first game. And at the moment, that previous story's mentioned, but you don't know really what happened. That's not articulated to you yet. So I don't think it's necessarily bad if you've not played the original, because it's a mystery still. This time round, you're not playing a bunch of teenagers. This time round, you're playing as the character Riley, who has basically gone back to, this is where they grew up, and they've got a job. They used to be in the army, and now they've got this job kind of doing a survey of the island by planting these transmitters. And akin to Oxenfree, the first game, weird stuff starts happening, and you find yourself and your colleague Jacob travelling over the island trying to fix this problem whilst encountering strange kind of occurrences where the whole screen will just glitch like you're looking at an old telly, and it will keep looping back as you're trying to find a way through it, really.
Okay.
And you've got this, they've brought forward from the first game, this radio, where you can just tune into different things to open doors. We have another radio to communicate with other people, so it has a little bit of a Firewatch vibe to it. But also the radio itself becomes this wonderful, this process of tuning into this world is very akin to, narratively as the player, you're trying to tune into this mystery that's here, really. And there's lots of little things that you can find and discover on the way if you want to trawl the whole map. In a nutshell, it is just more of the same. I've not seen anything yet that has, is doing anything overly different. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. The first Oxenfree came out in 2016. If, like me, you've waited this amount of time to play another chapter in that world, and that original is beloved by you, then you're going to really love this one, really. And it is just perfect for me on my Switch Lite. For those who are not big fans of horror games or horror in general, the horror, I would say, is not necessarily putting pressure on you to try and avoid a threat or anything like that. You're not running away. There's no time constraints on you at all, really. It's more just some of the images and the sound work itself are quite unsettling. But I would say that it's the whole veneer, the whole kind of look of it is this kind of spooky, Scooby-Doo-esque vibe, really, of one night some weird stuff's going on and we've got to fix this. You don't feel a victim in this. You feel like, okay, let's sort this out, and you can choose what kind of person you want to be based on how you respond to everyone else around you, really.
I guess I don't quite understand the horror. Like what kind of a horror is it? You were sort of saying unsettling. Like, are there jump scares? Are there? Is it gory? Is it
not gory at all? No,
okay.
Not gory at all. So what you have is some bits of possession, ghosts, but all through this radio. And the radio itself, that's not necessarily a new thing in kind of Victorian ghost stories. Around the birth of these technologies, this idea that when you could hear somebody's recorded voice for the very first time, this disembodied voice, invariably people can find the spectral in that.
Right.
There's invariably there is something haunted and spooky about everything that is pre-recorded. We're just kind of used to it now, but it is kind of weird that people are listening to us right now at a different time. We were talking about how when we first talked about Oxenfree, Dan had not long been a parent, and
it's wild, isn't it?
There's something really ghostly without being spooky necessarily about anything that's recorded. So this game does that fact. It tunes into that. And you do that by twizzling the knobs, or if you want to on your tablet, it's touch screen. You can use it that way to kind of use the radio as a means to tap into, to tune into the realm of the dead, I suppose, really. That's what it is.
Kris, I've got a question for you. What do the following games have in common?
Here we go.
FIFA 23, Returnal, The Quarry, Power Wash Simulator, Alba, A Wildlife Adventure, Elden Ring, Paw Patrol on a Roll, Untitled Goose Game. What do those games have in common?
They've all been spoken about on this pod.
It's close. It's close and it's not right. Basically, the thing these games all have in common is I've played them all very recently, and whilst I've been playing them, the exact same thing has happened. The thing that's happened is I've clicked on the PS button and it said, "Oh, you've got some friends online," and one of my friends online was Mr. Peter Willington, and every single time he was playing Diablo 4, every single time, doesn't matter what time of day, what day, night, weekend, weekday, there's always a little number. Boop, it's Pete. He's playing Diablo 4. Pete, have you done anything in the last week other than play Diablo 4?
I've done some things.
He's taken it into all the rooms around his house.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I must admit, if I'm playing on the PlayStation, I'm probably playing Diablo. It is, and I've been playing a lot more PlayStation recently, even though I have my lovely Steam Deck now. Did I tell you I've got a Steam Deck?
Yes, you did. Extensively.
And yeah, wow. This is like you. So I was a little bit surprised because we talked the other day about Diablo, and neither of you two are into Diablo or already have played it, right?
I've never played a single second of any Diablo game.
It's one of those games where I've heard it. I know exactly what the posters look like. I even know what the font looks like for the title. It's everywhere, Diablo. I've seen huge posters of it in HMV, wherever they are now. Mm-hmm. But I've never played it. I couldn't even tell you what the genre of game is.
Right.
I just look at the picture and go, that's probably not going to be something for me. So convince me.
So I also needed convincing. So Diablo isn't really the kind of game that I play either. This is a action RPG. So an action RPG there's a few different kinds, but this is more of a, you embody a character, so usually a single character in an action RPG, and they usually have a class. So I'm playing a rogue, Alex is playing a necromancer, but you can have things like barbarians and stuff like that. And the joke always used to be that like you would break mice doing it, click, 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 because they were very PC focused video games for a very long time. So you move the character around, and then you click on an enemy, and usually you either click, 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 or you click and hold, and then you do attack, 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 attack. There's a few skills required of the player in the game. The first is being able to do things like crowd control and understanding what enemies are coming towards you and how you might need to react, how you might need to deal with those enemies. There's a little bit of that. A big part of it is how you're actually speccing your character out. So you've got a whole bunch of different upgrades that you can purchase for your character. So I play an archer effectively, and I've got a special attack that fires lots of arrows really, really quickly. But I could also get another attack that does like a rain of arrows over a large area of space. And so I'm selecting the skills that I want to take with me into battle. Some of the skill is about speccing out your character with better armor and weapons, and some of that you'll just find throughout the world. In fact, a big appeal is like loot. The loot grind loop is big in these kinds of games. But some of the skill in there is also making sure that you're going to the right towns, getting the right stuff, going and grinding for resources so you can improve those resources, so that you can embed gems into cool bits of armor that you've got, those sorts of things. And if some of this is sounding familiar, if you've played Borderlands, imagine Borderlands, but played from third person. That was really what Borderlands did differently.
Right.
Borderlands went first person, but these kinds of looter action RPGs, Borderlands is a really good example of one of these things. And obviously it's a first person shooter as well, but this is very much fantasy, third person action role playing game. And they are not my cup of tea. The setting of it, it is dark, grim fantasy. Everything is awful, and when you think it can't be more, any more awful, it's suddenly even more awful. Like everything is bad. It's just bleak all the way down.
So, what audiobook are you listening to as you're playing?
So, I'm playing this co-op, and I'm playing it couch co-op. This is one of those rare big story games where you can play this entire thing with somebody on the couch sat next to you. And so Alex and I are playing this cooperatively on the PlayStation. And so we're chatting to each other while we're playing this thing. We've played it for hours and hours and hours, and we've just been hanging out and chatting away and talking about nonsense and watching this game, playing the game, talking about how cool that is. Like, oh, cool, his eyes burned him alive. Like, all of that good stuff. And at the same time, the actual moment-to-moment play of it is challenging and skillful enough that you're engaged. But it's not so challenging and skillful. And certainly the story is not super engaging, or at least I'm not that bothered about it. That it's okay if you sort of you aren't going to go and talk to every single villager because you don't really care what's going on to every single villager. You get it. It's bad, right? Things are bad, and you're the hero, and you need to sort it.
It's interesting with you talking about how bleak it is. Me and Sam recently started playing Returnal on PlayStation, which the story of within Returnal, the narrative of Returnal is quite dark and it's quite mysterious. But we found that that co-op element removed all of that because suddenly it's just about levity and it's about kind of having fun and just laughing, and we would joke about, oh, here comes a bit of story, and not fully engaging in it, but loving the experience. How much of this, because obviously the kind of the story beats and the genre and the style of story and the kind of the horror, proper true body horror kind of stuff you're talking about is obviously much, compared to Returnal, much worse than that in a good way for people who like that kind of thing. Do you still feel that darkness, or does the levity kind of take it out?
Yeah, you do. And I think for me, it's the way that it's delivered. So mechanically, the way Diablo delivers a bunch of its stories, it kind of takes the control away from you. So you are basically there watching a cutscene. And that means that there's sort of an unwritten rule between yourself and your couch co-op partner where you sort of go, oh, okay, well, we'll listen to this bit because they've taken the control away from us. So clearly there's something that we need to kind of pay attention to here. Whereas when it doesn't really matter, it just kind of lets you wander off and not really listen to what it is that's being said. Like some of that storytelling is incidental. But I think the thing that it does the most is that it's always unsettling because it has quite a limited palette with which to work. Because it's a third person and it's removed from the experience. So it's like not top down, like what we used to call it isometric, right? And I believe some of the previous entries were quite literally isometric. Because it's removed from that, there's not a huge amount of detail that you can see. So you can sort of see your characters' mouths moving and they're making gestures and all that sort of stuff. And it's really well put together. It's just the level of fidelity isn't really there. It's all kind of that slightly quaint video game canned animation stuff where it's like they're doing part of the movement. And because of that, it all comes through in the dialogue. Like it all comes through in the unsettling nature of the things that they're suggesting. And your brain takes on the horror and imagines it. So rather than something like Returnal, which is like obviously a gloriously gorgeous looking game, where it's like if they're not showing you something, it kind of doesn't exist. In Diablo 4, they're not showing you stuff and your brain is filling in the gaps. And that is wonderful.
That's the question I wanted to ask, because when Sam and I played Dead Space 2 and Dead Space 3, that's also a very good-looking game, but a lot of the horror is in its sound design.
Yes.
Not necessarily just solely its visuals. Yes, there are jump scares, but it's that image coupled with the sounds that have built up to that, where you think it's coming from one place and then there's a lull and then suddenly it appears. So that's what I wanted to ask really in terms of how the sound design works in this. You've mentioned dialogue, but how does the game sound?
Sounds amazing. Yeah, so mechanically the game is very click, 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 right? You are a hero, right? And you are an extremely powerful, very competent hero, right? So it's not horror in so much as the things that are happening to you. And that's really important for the sound design because there's a lot of action going on. And when you hear the same sound of the bow firing, for example, over and over and over again, one of the earliest achievements that Alex and I got was kill 666, I think it was like beast men. And then another achievement that we got was kill 666 wraiths. Like, you're killing a lot. Like, things are getting... and because of that, you're shooting a lot of arrows, right? You're an extremely competent person. But you're hearing those sounds over and over and over and again, and they could get very grating. So there's a thing in audio design whereby you have to be slightly worried by things like sound clash, which is the idea that you're hearing that so many actions are happening that have sounds that it just sounds like a cacophony. And
just a minute.
That always comes through sharp. But let's say, for example, if you've got 50 different things happening all at once and they all have a sound effect attached to it, you could imagine how that might become too much. Well, the sound design is really clever in terms of its sound clash. It's always really good at prioritizing the audio that you need to hear as a player. So yes, there are beasts going and doing all sorts of horrible death sounds and all that sort of stuff, which, by the way, very rarely repeat. Like, there's tons of stuff that, it really doesn't great. But the actual audio mix seems to prioritize player feedback through audio. So I can tell that I have just unleashed my ultimate skill above all of the din. And I will always hear that above and beyond, a tree lord growling at me, right? And the music, oh, Kris, if you want to be convinced for anything, go listen to the music for Diablo 4.
I will do.
You will. It's gorgeous, and a lot of the haunting, a lot of the horror atmosphere comes through the music, which is just unbelievably good.
It's really interesting you saying that you're playing this co-op, because I think that actually forgives a lot of the things that you perhaps would not be turned on to of a game of this sort.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
grim horror, but also the fact that I've just looked at howlongtobeat.com and the campaign for this clocks in around 35 hours.
Okay.
Which is something as something to do with somebody else, as a nice little couples thing, is actually quite nice, Yeah. Are you envisaging, if you, in your head, are you thinking, okay, we're happy to commit to this for quite a long period of time. It's not something we're trying to religiously perhaps finish as soon as possible, really. Are you?
So this is where... So I will say, with Diablo 4, I have been playing, with Alex, the campaign, right? So there's like a main storyline. And what we haven't gone on to is, because video games are in a horrible place, everything has to be a live service to some degree. There are seasons of content that are coming. And I have heard that... So there is... Oh, Kris, there is a ton of content ahead of us beyond the campaign. I have basically said yes to Alex to doing the campaign, like the main storyline, because I'm kind of interested in playing an action RPG in that way and seeing what Diablo 4 has to offer. And I'm really enjoying that. Whether or not I'll go on and do the somewhat controversial seasonal stuff, the reason for the controversy is varied, and it's very difficult to figure out what's ultra fanboys kind of getting their knickers in a twist and what's genuinely like an actual problem. There does seem to be a bit of a mix between the two. but like this game could go on forever, and I don't think that that will be what we end up doing. I think we will probably enjoy the campaign, do all the side, really mop up all the side quests and have a great time. And then I think I'll probably be like, brilliant, that was great. That's my fill of Diablo 4. That game will go on forever and ever and ever, I'm sure. But you're right in that playing it co-op has really egged me on to actually doing it more. I do think I probably would have churned if it was just me playing this myself, because it's not my cup of tea. Like, I love RPGs, I love tabletop RPGs, but the thing I love about RPGs is the storytelling. And Diablo has a story to tell, and it's, I mean, not mucking around, there's a ton of lore. Like there's a load of lore and backstory and stuff like that. And Alex is, every once in a while, it's brilliant. She gets to do that thing now where she gets to do what I do to her with Warhammer 40,000, where she will turn around to me and she'll go, that's this character. He was actually killed in this previous version of the game, and it's really important because that character is the one who killed him. So it's really interesting that this is really happening. I'm like, oh no, this is what I sound like.
Cliff notes.
Yeah, basically. And so that's wicked. Like, that's really cool to have somebody who really loves that stuff and is really kind of up on it. And I will say this, they are without a doubt well worth you going and watching the opening cinematic for Diablo 4 as well. This is Blizzard at their absolute height of being able to do cutscenes. They've always been really good at them, like always. Go back and play Warcraft 3 or just look for the bits and pieces of Warcraft 3. Even back then, they knew what they were doing. This is like a totally different level. I would watch a film of their opening cutscene. It's absurdly good. Like, some of the, again, this is the producer in me talking, but like some of the stuff they're doing, I'm just sat there like, damn, that must have been expensive. Like some of it is like, I'm sort of like keeping a tally of how pricey some of the stuff they must have been doing. And I'm like, man, that must have been, and it's in the cutscenes, but it's also in things like, so my understanding is one of the reasons that Diablo 3 got quite a lot of flack is because there were quite a lot of like generative dungeons. Like, they weren't unique. They were just kind of glommed together, and eventually you start to kind of see the seams. Diablo 4, I believe, is almost entirely manually authored content, which is, again, like super expensive. Every town looks like a different town. Every dungeon, yeah, there's similar parts, but they all look different and they all fit really well. And they also all, like the best tabletop role-playing game dungeons, they all tell a story in the geography and in the architecture. Like, you're like, oh, this is very clearly a place people came to hide and they should not have hidden here. And it's never like told to you in like the story, but it's told to you through the atmosphere.
Embedded narrative, yeah.
Oh, it's absolutely, deeply entrenched within, the atmosphere around it. Really, really clever. Should I convince you to play it? No, I don't think you two would actually enjoy it. But like, for an action RPG, like if you've any interest in that as a genre, that's the place to start.
It's interesting because the visual of it, the kind of the look of the game, the style of the game is, I always just associate that with PC gaming. And I'm not a particularly PC gamer, because absolutely that point and click.
I know exactly what you mean.
I look at that style, that kind of top down kind of thing, and think that's PC gaming. That's not for me. That's not an environment that I sit comfortably in. And obviously these games have been on consoles before. This isn't a new thing. I think it's really interesting that it's never seemingly made that leap to either a first-person shooter or a third-person shooter. Something like a Tomb Raider took that step when it needed to kind of get new people in and kind of reboot. They changed the dynamic of what the game was, and they've been very successful with it. So it's interesting that Diablo haven't done that. So what I kind of like, how well does it work with a controller? As someone who's never played it, and to me, awesome. I totally see how it would work with a mouse, point and click. Totally get that. That makes sense. Based on the visuals, I can just see how that works. With a controller, I'm kind of not as clear.
Oh, Dan. Yeah, so it's wonderful. So they have spent, again, so much time and effort getting those controls right. So you might want to think of like the controls in kind of like 2 or 3 different ways, right? There's the combat, right? And this game is combat. Like, Like that's what you're going to be doing for 95% of the time. Like it's combat, and it's fun, really fun, and it makes you feel. And it's a power fantasy, not mucking around. It makes you feel like a badass. It's really cool. Like it's absolute power fantasy. And they have spent a ton of time getting that right. So your left stick is obviously movement, but also it's the direction in which you're going to be facing to shoot your weapon. So I'll give you an example of the archer that I have, my rogue. I run in a direction and some skeletons are there, and I get surrounded by skeletons, let's say. The direction I'm facing, and then I hit X, and that's the direction I'm going to be shooting my arrow, right? And it will lock on to the target that's mostly in that direction, right? So it'll go, okay, you're pointing this direction. You're probably pointing at this skeleton. Hold X, you start shooting at that skeleton. And if there's a skeleton next to them, once you finish killing that baddie, the aim will essentially kind of automatically lock, but not quite. It will automatically target the next closest thing if there's a close enough skeleton. But if there's not, it will just keep shooting in that direction. You'll be hitting nothing, right? So it's got a bit of generosity to it, but not a huge amount. So you do have to actually think. You're not just holding a button, moving along, and that's it. Like you can just finish the game like that. You do actually have to think about what it is that you're targeting. Then the other face buttons and some of the shoulder buttons are used for special skills as well on top of that. So I was saying you unlock special abilities. So you've got your normal attack with cross, let's say, and then you might on square put what I do is I charge up my arrows with a specific magic type, and I do that by pressing square. So that like gives me a buff to my character. With triangle, I summon some little weird wispy things to follow around me, and they're kind of like a little mini shield. But if I really want to hammer an enemy, I hold R2, and that's a really hardcore very fast arrow storm, essentially fast moving set of arrows, and it all just blends seamlessly. Like it all in the combat, it all just works. And I thought, it might be a situation where I have to really think about which button press I'm doing. It really isn't. Like after 5 or 10 minutes, it's just like any other game. You're just going into it. So there's the combat controls, and that's one massive area, and they've clearly spent just a ton of money and effort doing this, getting it right. And then there's the other part, which is basically like everything else. So that's how do you interact with the menus to kit out your characters? How do you go through the menus, like just, looking at the map and things along those lines. And again, they've spent a decent amount of time on those, but those are all kind of things that have sort of been solved before. And I would say that the combat works better than the menus. Weirdly, the combat is probably the more difficult thing to get right, and it works effortlessly, I would say. Menus are fine. We're playing co-op, like I say, and it's on the same screen. It's not split screen. It's on the same screen. So they've done an amazing job of fitting two sets of information, two very dense sets of information onto one screen. One for each character. And you can do basically everything you want to do while you have another character there. So you open up the menu to look through all of your kit, and the other player can be running around the world at the same time on the same screen as you. But they can also open their screen as well. So they can have two massive menus open, and it all works pretty well. There's a little bit of overlap here and there with like a few little tooltips, that sort of thing. But by and large, it works incredibly well. So in answer to your question, honestly, if I was playing this on PC, I'd play it with a controller anyway. Like I actually would. So it's kind of a relaxed gameplay experience, funnily enough, if you're playing on a controller. If you're playing with a mouse and keyboard, it's going to be a little bit more like click, 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 like, and really like deliberately like moving your mouse around really, really quickly and all that sort of stuff. But with the controller in your hand, it's very, laid back, really, for such an action-focused game. So yeah, they did really, really well with it. I'm just really impressed. And the other big thing is, being a PC game, you might be mistaken for thinking that maybe it's inefficient, because obviously with PC you get a lot more resources to play with on the hardware. We are playing this on PlayStation 4. It looks amazing. It loads fast. It's smooth. It's great. Like, there's no mucking around. It works beautifully. It's got all the bells and whistles. So it has cross-platform play. So, like, you could play this against somebody on PC from PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 or whatever it is. Yeah, and it seems to scale really, really well as well. So on PlayStation 4, you'll probably play it on relatively low settings. But if you want to crank that stuff up, like the game looks amazing. The lighting is absurdly good. Like, yeah, it's a technical tour de force. And the fact that they've got it working on PlayStation 4 is kind of incredible, actually. Kind of incredible. I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't working on a Switch version, because I think if they can make it work on a PS4, I don't think it'll be too far away to make it work on a Switch. Yeah, it's amazing. And you should totally play it if you fancy playing an action RPG. If any of that sounds like, ooh, no, I'm not up for that, it's that, but for like 30, 40, 50 hours.
Dan, I just want to take this opportunity on the pod to thank you for recommending me The Bear.
Ooh.
I watched a bit of that when I was away. Really enjoyed it. As you said, Dan, episodes are really short and they fly by because it's quite intense each episode.
Very intense.
I want to recommend to you a TV series that is short episodes but not intense at all. And this is a romantic comedy. And I don't usually watch romantic comedies, not because I have anything against them at all. It's just that I've not seen many that have done well because you're combining two genres there that are inherently very, very subjective. A little bit like horror, really. We're all afraid of different things and we're drawn to different types of horror or not at all. Likewise, romance and comedy, getting that right mix of those two things is quite a difficult balance to strike. So I want to recommend to you Colin from Accounts, which is a series that is on iPlayer. It's from Australia, from Binge. 8 episodes, each one 30 minutes, only one series. And I've found it quite a delight. It's a little bit of a Trojan horse. The premise is bonkers, and it's a premise just designed to get two people who wouldn't usually meet or hang out together. We have Harriet Dyer and Patrick Bramall, who incidentally are a real-life couple. And the premise is this, that Harriet Dyer, who plays this character of Ashley, she's a student doctor, and she's just broken up with her partner, and she's a bit, she's not quite gotten over them. And on her way to work one day, she's walking across the road and she sees a bloke in a car, and he gives way. He stops and lets her cross, and just in a kind of a weird kind of way of showing kind of gratitude and just for a laugh, she just flashes him. And in the process of doing that, he accidentally hits a dog. And
why did I laugh at that bit?
And they end up then both taking the dog to the vets, and the owner isn't there. There's no owner, and the dog needs looking after, so they both end up having to look after it, because he says, no, it wasn't my fault, you take the dog. She takes the dog. Her landlord says, you can't have pets here. She's got nowhere to go. So she ends up going back to his. And there's this really interesting dynamic where the two of them are from quite different backgrounds. Obviously, she's a student doctor. He is the owner of a microbrewery, Pete. And he is like you in 10 years' time if you're Australian and if you'd gone down that route of owning a microbrewery. Like, you learn a lot from him about all the different kind of beers and things. It's
God,
really...
He's already hooked.
Yeah.
And she just... and she doesn't really care, but she's got a lot on her plate, really. She's got this mum who is so irritating. And, like, I don't know if you ever watched an Australian TV series called Kath and Kim back in the day.
Yeah.
Very, very funny series. She's a bit like... Kim from that, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And he's trying to run this microbrewery, but he can't say, he's got all these debts, but he's finding it difficult trying to reach out to these people and ask for the money they owe him. And it does this really interesting thing where the humor is quite deadpan, which I love. The situations are almost, can be quite crude at times, but really, really funny, because at the core of this whole sitcom is this beautiful, sweet sincerity. So to give you kind of an example, episode 2, she's staying over at his house, obviously in the spare room, because Colin needs round-the-clock care. And the episode begins with her, he's just asleep, the camera's asleep, he's, there, he sees bedside table, him asleep. And she just wanders into his room, pulls out his drawer, and just turns around, sits on his drawer, and just starts going to the toilet, just urinating. She's sleepwalking, she's asleep. Oh. And you just see his reaction. And he says nothing about it. Downstairs later, and she kind of goes, I think she walks into his room later on and realizes what she's done. She's, oh my gosh, it's happened again. This hasn't happened since I was a kid. I wonder if he knows. And the whole episode is her getting her mum to go and replace his furniture. They go to a furniture store to replace it. So what starts as something quite crude, and you think, oh, is that just a cheap laugh? Yes, it is a little bit of a cheap laugh at the beginning. Evolves into something always inherently sweet.
Right. Okay.
There's a little bit of pathos there, because you need to have a little bit of drama in places, but the people that surround them are equally quite flawed, quite quirky human beings. The people he works with in the microbrewery, the people in her family. When she's struggling to be a student and a doctor and trying to manage her love life and stuff. And for 8 episodes, each one 30 minutes, it's just a lovely thing to have on, really. And I can highly recommend it. It's got tons of plaudits, not that should mean anything, and I really hope they make a second season of it. Colin from Accounts is just a real joy.
It does sound like the style of humour you describe is kind of what I think of when I think of some of those like great Australian comedies, the likes of like Kath and Kim, or I remember remember Wilfred, the one with Elijah Wood. I think that was Australian, I think, where he has like an imaginary friend who's basically a guy in a dog costume. Do you remember that?
Is that like Harvey almost with the rabbit?
Is this a dream?
I don't think it was a dream.
Yeah, right. Yes, it was. Yes, I remember it now. Yes.
So like that, like that comedy Wilfred with Elijah Wood, like that kind of almost deadpan humour, but put in like this absurdist environment. I mean, obviously with Colin from Accounts, it sounds like, okay, we want to basically see what happens when two strangers go from being strangers to having a child, and obviously that's impossible. But you that's why you've got the dog there. So obviously it's an absurdist scenario to put them in, and then that kind of filters out from there. So it sounds like that kind of comedy is what I think of when I think of kind of those kind of American, when I think of those Australian kind of things, and that sense of humour seems to be kind of alive and well in Colin from Accounts. So obviously Colin from Accounts is the titular dog, I assume.
Yes, and he's at the centre of it, and occasionally the camera will just cut to him, and it'd be a ridiculous situation. He'll cut to this adorable dog. They've cast the most adorable looking dog as Colin, and bless him, because of the accident, his back legs are in a kind of like, he's got like a wheels now, and Colin's at the centre of it all, really. But so occasionally it will just cut to Colin, and you're just always reminded that Colin is this catalyst for not only for the meeting, but Colin almost represents their relationship,
right?
Because at instances where they don't get on with each other, they think, no, I think this is stupid, this isn't working. They can't, because they can't leave, because everything comes back to Colin. They can't each look after Colin; they have to do it together,
right?
And it's really, really interesting. Everywhere they go, they have to take Colin with them. And, when there's a shot of them in the car, he's just at the back in the middle. And it's fantastic. It's really interesting, because often in these kinds of premises, it's a ridiculous situation, these two meet, and then the writer has this very difficult job of trying to find excuses for these people to stay together.
Together.
Yeah. for the whole 8 episodes, they don't need to do that because there's Colin.
Yeah.
This narrative anchor that sits just at the center of the show.
Yeah. And I think it's really well written. It's written by this real life couple. And it's really interesting because it feels at times, perhaps it is, I don't obviously know them, semi-autobiographical. And it's naked and unvarnished in the sense that it reveals a lot of insecurities from both of them. You know, he is nearly, you know, he's in his late 40s. He feels his age gap. Ashley's just turns 30 in this, and he feels his own anxieties about his own health. Likewise, she is at this kind of crossroads in terms of her love life and what the hell she's doing, and she doesn't feel she's got the support of her family whatsoever. She feels just quite really estranged from them, really. And at instances, you flip-flop thinking, I really don't like her as a person, or I don't really like him as a person. And then you discover, actually, like in real life as human beings, we're neither perfect or imperfect. We're just somewhere in between, really. And that really isn't a new thing in sitcoms, particularly situation comedies over the last decade and a half or so. But I think the premise itself, the characters they have here, and just how brazen it is in certain areas, you know, it doesn't flinch from certain things, makes it something that is both hilarious and touching, really, I would say, in equal measure.
I've just noticed that the actor who plays the lead, the lead male in this, also voices one of the characters in CBeebies Bluey. So I'll be tuning in.
Do you know it was National Chocolate Bar Day the other day? Did you see that in the news?
Oh, yeah, many happy returns.
In the news.
Yes.
Yeah.
Top of the news at 10.
Yeah. Yeah, Trevor McDonald sat there and as we all
Trevor
know.
McDonald, when was the last time you watched the news?
Very rare, very rare.
Do you want to know what are the top 5 chocolate bars in the UK? The nation's favourite 5 chocolate bars.
This is a game that we need to play, and I think I know what number 1 is, but let's try and figure it out ourselves.
I will say, as a caveat on this, that some of these are really stretching the definition of a bar, if you know what I mean. So just bear that in mind.
Okay.
Just throw one out then, come on.
Okay. I think number 1 is Mars.
Mars is not in the top 5.
You're joking.
Yes. I'm going for Dairy Milk.
Dairy Milk is number 1, Daniel.
Booyah!
What?
Yeah.
Does that hold on. Does that include all variants of Dairy Milk? It must do.
Pete, you lost. Just accept it. You
The whole
lost.
lot?
You were
Fine.
so confident. You walked in there with your strut, with your Mars bar strut.
I think it is. I think, Pete, it is actually just the plain, simple. Some would say elegant. Dairy Milk.
I don't believe you. I just don't believe you.
Okay, so Dan's already literally straight off the mark called number 1. We need 2 to 5.
All right, number 2 through 5. So I think and this is amongst the Brits.
Yes.
Okay, well, all right.
Because the Americans like the Mars. You were getting confused, weren't you?
Also, they'll do Hershey's.
Another caveat, for some reason, this came from Betway.
Where I get most of my... Yeah, okay. Well, let's assume that it's true. Okay, well, I think... What else could... Snickers.
No.
What is...
Okay.
Oh,
I'm on this. Okay. No. Do I go confident, the one I'm confident with? Or do I lean into what Kris said in terms of one of them being stretching what a bar could be? I'm going to go confident for now. I'm going to say Twix.
Twix is not on there, Daniel.
What?
Oh,
Outrageous.
Overconfident from Dan Frost. Okay, so a chocolate bar. Britain, there's a lot... British people, there's a lot riding on this. You better have got these right. Okay, let's say... Do you know what? I'm just going to throw one out there. I don't necessarily... I'm not necessarily thinking this is correct, but a Galaxy bar.
Number 2, well done.
Oof, thank goodness. Okay,
so I think we're getting something here. People like basic kind of chocolate. They don't like
Simple.
any froofy stuff. Any caramel in there.
No frills.
No, yeah.
I'm going to go with I don't think it's going to be there, but I'm going to go with my favourite chocolate bar because I need to just check. And my favourite chocolate bar is a Cadbury's Boost.
No, if Boost isn't on there, I didn't think you could get Boost now. I've not had a Boost since I was about 13.
Oh yeah, you can still get them. Also double deckers still alive and strong, and they are excellent.
Also. No, over to Pete.
Okay, well, okay, no, this is really hard because I would have thought Mars would have been on there, but if it's not on there, then I guess all I can really point towards is like, goodness, what would the great British public shove in their gob and call a bar? What about a Milky Bar?
No, I love a Milky Bar.
Yeah, I love a Milky Bar.
All right, we're losing momentum here, so I'm going to lean into the one that I thought that Kris may have been alluding to in terms of it stretching what a bar could be, and I'm going to say Maltesers, which, granted, is not a bar.
Number 5, Daniel.
There we go.
That's
See,
number 5.
see.
Wait. Hold on.
It's clearly not a bar, so clearly we can look at other stuff now.
You can get the Maltesers bar, though. You can get a bar.
Yeah,
A Malteser bar.
Yeah, that's number 5. There's one on here you should get, and another one which you'll have heard of it, but you would not think it'd be on this list.
Kris, put us out of our misery, because
I think all I'll say is have a break.
Kit Kat.
No.
That's
Okay.
number 4.
That's
no. You're not going to like number 3, Pete, at all.
Well, I'm not happy about the Kit Kat. So.
Well, no, number 3, Pete. Ambassador, you spoil us.
Ferrero Rocher.
Yeah. That's number 3, apparently. I cannot stand Ferrero Rocher.
No,
it's like shrapnel.
Well, I'm not here for anti-Ferrero Rocher sentiment, but
I am.
but
That's why I make this podcast.
famous for it. But a Ferrero Rocher, is there like a bar? There can't be, can there? There is a chocolate bar that is a Ferrero Rocher. Well, you learn something new every day.
Wow, listener, if you've learnt something new today, why not let us know?
Nice.
I just want to check, with all that's going on in this turbulent time of social media, is Instagram the only bastion? Is Instagram the last bastion for us in terms of how our listeners get in touch with us?
You know what? Instagram has got lots of nice pictures of us doing nice things. Maybe we'll put a picture on there from Bavaria. Maybe Dan will put a picture of him at home. You can always find whatever latest doodad we're on stayinginpodcast.com. Wait, is it stayinginpodcast.com? Yeah, stayinginpodcast.com. You can always go to stayinginpodcast.com. That's where all the stuff that we link out to goes there. We are currently linking to Instagram, so I guess we're that's a good one. Nice pictures, that's always good. We are on Facebook, we are on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now. Who knows how long that'll be. But more importantly, Steam Curator and Board Game Geek, we do have pages on there. Again, you can find them from stayinginpodcast.com. And the reason that we have stuff like that is it's actually useful for you folks, because it literally talks about all the video games that we've talked about. You can just find them all there, and it's got links back to the podcast that we talk about them. So if you're like, oh, I wonder what OXENFREE was talked about, and you've forgotten the number of podcasts that it was actually on, you can click on OXENFREE review on the Steam Curator page, and it'll take you straight to it, and you can start listening to it. Equally with Board Game Geek, it talks about every single board game that we've ever covered, and we have covered a whole bunch of board games on this podcast. It also links out to all the lovely places you can listen to this, but obviously you're listening to it somewhere, so I'm going to try something. Please subscribe. Please subscribe if you are, or follow, or whatever the devil it is that the Apple Podcasts calls it now. Please subscribe, follow, whatever it is that you want to do for free, so that you get this delivered to you each and every fortnight-ish, twice a month. There you go. Give that a go.
That's a fortnight.
That's a fortnight.
And I'm going to be sticking some music from Diablo 4 and Oxenfree 2 Lost Signals
gorgeous.
on our Spotify playlists, which are a laugh to get to, but you can get through our show notes here as well. I love a little curated playlist for all your different moods. And also, just in closing, make sure whenever you leave a room, never leave it empty-handed.